Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar presented to you by the Drug Advisory Council of Australia. My name is Jan Kronberg, and I'm the National President of the Drug Advisory Council, and we call ourselves DACA, just a shorthand way. I'm really pleased tonight that our broadcast is going out right across Australia. It's very important because our message is a powerful one tonight, and we want as many people to have a message to share and to disseminate on our behalf. So I really welcome everybody from Queensland, from New South Wales, from Tasmania, from South Australia, from Western Australia, and also here in Victoria, right throughout metropolitan Melbourne and regional Victoria. So a big welcome to you all. And I know that we've got a number of people from academe, people with exotic titles as professor and associate professor. So welcome to the very erudite audience here tonight. And we look forward to receiving some questions from you after we hear from our speakers. I want to thank our technical guru here tonight, Gabriel Tipness, who's in charge of the studio, and so it gives us a lot of confidence with the nature of this sort of broadcast, having Gabriel on board. I want to also share some excellent news with you because on the 18th of March this year, DACA became a registered charity under the auspices of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. So we operate now under the categorisation of harm prevention, which we're very focused on. And we like to take all aspects of society with us in our journey in terms of pointing out all of the problems associated with the use and the impact of illicit drugs on society. So as we continue our fight on the scourge of illicit drugs, we need to encourage you to support us. If you can help us in a material way through financial support and in a spiritual way in terms of your commitment and your other ways of helping us get our message out and coming to our events. If you're in a position to make a donation, that is most welcome. It helps defray the cost. Just to remind you that our body is a body at the moment still entirely staffed by volunteers. And so anything you can do to help defray the cost for us is most welcome. And you can make donations. Gabriel has put up a means of making donations by visiting our website. Another way you can support DACA is by purchasing a very special book that our co-founder, Elaine Walters, OAM, has written, and it's called Street Drugs, the New Addiction Industry. So you can buy that book by visiting our website. So that's daca.org.au. And in addition to that, other newsy things is that on Saturday, the 4th of May, we have our first fundraising event for 2024. And in fact, it's called 2024 According to Spooner. And once again, the celebrated and brilliant cartoonist from the Australian, John Spooner, is going to be our guest speaker. And so we're flying under the banner of 2024 According to Spooner. And you'll see one of Spooner's cartoons from just a few weeks ago in the Australian. Now, the people who attended that event last year were gobsmacked as to how clever he is, and you'll be in the presence of sheer genius and a very charming man, and it's a lot of fun, and it helps us raise money. And that will be once again at the Heidelberg Golf Club. Now, tonight our focus is on the lived experience of the enforcement of drug laws, and it's going to be recounted to us by former police officers. And there's so much to be concerned about across this nation. Now, the pervasiveness of the drug culture is manifest, and many people say that the war against illicit drugs and the acceptance and the uptake of them and the addiction of that brings about death and destruction, that the war has been lost. Well, we actually say that the war has never been fought. And that's what we're doing. That's the banner we're flying under with our webinars throughout 2024. The war we never fought. And our wonderful police officers who have left the force, both in Victoria and in Western Australia, have plenty to say about what it was like from police wishing to enforce the laws against the taking and sale and distribution of illicit drugs. Now, I'll just share one little thing that might startle you, and these are the little stories that cause us to forge on and to be bold and to insist that our message is transported across the nation. Recently, a confidant whispered something quite startling to me, and it goes like this. This person said, "Jan, during my time practicing the law, many colleagues took drugs, typically marijuana and cocaine. However, I was really shocked when I found out that the judges were taking them too. And by the way, I'm 100% behind your work, Jan. It's a very gratifying thing, but it's also a very frightening thing to share with you. That's the truth. And this is the problem. There are too many either addicted or embedded or part of the problem. Too many people who are willfully blind. And we hope people do sit up and take notice. From our perspective, it's the dangers are closing in on us. And this evening, you'll hear from two speakers, and then we'll put questions to them. Now, we are inviting you to text questions by using the mobile number that Gabriel's going to put on the screen for you. And you text those questions. That phone is sitting next to me, and I'll put those questions when our speakers have finished their addresses. So now I'm very pleased. I'll be introducing Councillor Kevin McDonald first, and then we'll be hearing from Peter Richardson, who's sitting next to me in the studio. So there's Peter, and you should see on the screen Councillor Kevin McDonald. Now, Kevin McDonald officially joined DACA late last year, actually, so we're really pleased to have him making this sort of commitment to us so early in his involvement with our organisation. He retired as a police officer in Western Australia at the rank of Detective Sergeant in 2018. Now, Kevin served 29 years as a detective and worked in areas including serious and organised crime squad, the proceeds of crime squad, tactical investigation group, homicide task force, and metropolitan detectives. Kevin is still in full-time work with the WA Police Union supporting frontline police. And so from the outset, Kevin, officially I would like to say thank you for your service, 29 years serving the people of WA as a police officer, and for what you're doing for the police who are currently in service. Kevin is also an aspiring politician and was the pre-selected candidate for the Liberal Party in the WA seat of Thornley in 2021 state election there. Kevin is currently serving as a councillor in his local area at the city of Gosnells. Even though retired from policing, Kevin maintains a passion in the fight against illicit drugs and is the author of numerous published articles, and we've seen them published in the News Weekly magazine from the Drug Advisory Council perspective, and we thank Kevin for those contributions. And he's mainly concerned with the ongoing failure of the WA state Labor government and senior police management to better control the sale and supply of methamphetamine. He uses the shorthand of meth through his talk. So we now invite Kevin to address our national audience. Kevin.
Thanks very much, Jan. It's my pleasure to be here. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'd like to discuss a couple of issues. Firstly, as Jan mentioned, the failure of the West Australian Government and WA Police Senior Management to properly address the methamphetamine epidemic here in Western Australia, and also briefly challenge some of the alarming and unfounded rhetoric surrounding the legalisation of cannabis. I'm concerned primarily about the distinct lack of accountability, disingenuous reporting, along with the pretense of success by the WA government and police management. But back in 2017, the extent of the meth crisis across Western Australia was significant and causing a great deal of anguish throughout the community. And this crisis presented the Labor Party, who claimed to have the solutions, with a strong platform they used to defeat the Liberals in their election win that year. But in the 7 years since, Labor's so-called meth action plan has been an abject failure, while over that time costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. So this failed plan ensured immeasurable pain, trauma and heartache continued to impact West Australian families and communities, and the latest wastewater data proves that things have not only continued, but worsened. On occasions when police intercept large quantities of meth, government and police management make grandiose claims of success and of putting a dent in the meth supply. These spurious claims are demonstrably false. Even though large interceptions are the result of outstanding police work and they deserve to be applauded, they have little or no impact on the overall supply or consumption of meth. So let me just explain that. So by adding together total amounts of meth seized by police with total meth consumed according to wastewater testing results, it's safe to conclude that WA police intercept less than 10% of the quantum of meth circulating in the community at any one time. So with the remaining 90% of meth being sold, supplied and consumed in the community, it's easy to understand why Western Australia consistently consumes more meth than most, and particularly in regional Western Australia, where the latest wastewater testing results show consumption is the highest in the country. So how do police measure their performance when it comes to drug crime? I'd suggest not very well. The minimal data provided by WA Police on their website is confusing and a disingenuous depiction of police results as they relate to drug crime. Now, if you were to go to their website, I'll just explain what you might see. The Western Australia Police describes sanction rates as an indicator of police effectiveness in achieving offence investigation outcomes, such as the processing of an offender. The WA Police Incident Report System for the last 6 months of 2023 shows sanction rates for burglary offences at 33%, stealing at 30%, and family assaults at 23%. And at the same time, the sanction rate for drug crime was 90%. Now, this indicator of police effectiveness suggests to the general public that WA police are achieving outstanding outcomes investigating drug crime when compared with other offences. And nothing could be further from the truth. Unlike burglary, stealing or family assault incident reports, which are created when reported by the public, drug incident reports are created by police themselves. So the reports are created by police usually at the time of drug seizures and invariably includes the apprehension of an offender at the same time, hence the high sanction rate. Now, this creates the impression of success, and WA police deliberately include drug crime data with other offences when really they should belong in a different data category. And WA police declare this distinction from other crime types, and I would suggest this is a scandalous misrepresentation by police management. Adding insult to injury, the other sleight of hand feature of police drug reporting involves the actual total number of recorded offences. As I've explained, the total number of incident reports for offences like assaults, burglary and stealing are reported by the public. Therefore, a reduction in these types of reports indicates crime is decreasing. So naturally, government and police management will claim success. So too, when drug incident reports decline, it creates the impression that drug crime is decreasing. Now, like the false impression created by sanction rates that I've just explained, this is also not true. The truth is, a reduction in drug crime reports actually indicates reduced police activity and productivity, and it is certainly not an indicator of success, as government and police management would have everyone believe. This is clearly mendacious. If it wanted, the government could demand police abide by the National Crime Recording Standard, which records the count of crime victims, whereas WA Police uses a method of counting offences. As I mentioned at the start, an equally urgent focus should be to address the activist pressure on governments to legalise illicit drugs such as cannabis. I would just like to address some comments attributed to the former AFP Police Commissioner Mick Palmer in his Pennington Institute oration in November 2023, which I believe should not go unchallenged. On the Pennington Institute website, Mr. Palmer reportedly claims, and I quote, "The damage done by arrest and sanction for use and possession of cannabis far outweighs any public good likely to be achieved by the arrest or the possible harm or damage caused to the offender by the use itself." Now, there's some practical realities that factually repudiate these provocative statements. As a long-serving West Australian police officer and drug squad detectives, I can emphatically state that persons apprehended in possession of personal use amounts of cannabis are almost never arrested unless there is evidence of sale, supply, or some other offence, court process, or warrant. People are almost never arrested for the offence of possessing cannabis alone. In fact, in most cases in Western Australia, the offence of possession of cannabis does not meet the legislative threshold that gives police the authority to even effect a lawful arrest. Generally, with some exceptions, the power to arrest a person is restricted to serious offences, which are those where the statutory penalty includes 5 years imprisonment or more. Possession of a prohibited drug is a simple offence and punishable by a maximum of 2 years imprisonment. Therefore, the police have no powers to arrest for simple possession of cannabis. And as for sanctions, there is a host of diversionary options imposed by police before charges are even considered, such as cannabis infringement notice, cannabis intervention requirements, or drug diversion notices. If an offender is subsequently criminally charged, it is almost always by summons, which if they endorse, they don't even have to appear in court. So given the rarity of police arrest and minor outcomes, I fail to see how they can cause any damage, never mind outweighing the damage caused by cannabis use itself. Evidence going to the psychological harm caused by cannabis use is capacious, compelling, irrefutable, and often based on systematic review. Now, further in his oration, Mr. Palmer also made the claim that, and again I quote, "It will take courage for governments to move away from the popularist, quick-fixed, prohibitionist approach." Now, the premise of this statement must also be challenged. Prohibition is and always has been about reducing availability, reducing harm, and creating a social paradigm that loathes illicit drug use. And this is what a responsible community should demand and expect from its governments, particularly for the safety of young people. Research proves that young people are dangerously exposed to the life-changing and sometimes tragically life-taking consequences of cannabis. Prohibition was never claimed to be a quick fix. If prohibition and law enforcement give way to legalisation, a critical barrier and defence against the perceived legitimacy and general acceptance of cannabis will be lost forever. And tragically, it will be our children and our children's children who will bear the pain and trauma in the years ahead. What will require courage from governments is to stand firm against activist pressure and maintain the fight against attempts to legalise dangerous drugs such as cannabis. And what is also required by government and police agencies is to incorporate integrity into reporting, acknowledge failure where it occurs, display honesty toward a long-suffering public who, after investing their faith and hundreds of millions of dollars into the drug war deserve so much better. Thank you, Jan. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Kevin, thank you very much for that profound and very powerful address, and all of the special information that you've brought to bear. I just want to make a comment when you've spoken about the damage to our children and our children's children. If we continue on this gradient that we're on, it might be that the children don't have the children. People who take cannabis, let's say from the age of 12 or 13, will have the development of their brain severely impacted on. But because cannabis can't be flushed out like alcohol through the kidneys, it resides in the fatty tissue in the brain, in the ovaries and in the testes. And this affects people's powers to be a full human being, and it also affects their ability to procreate. And unfortunately, cannabis use has led us to have an alarming rise in testicular cancer, particularly in young men. So you're wise to highlight the generational potential, and there's another way of looking at it as well if we continue on this gradient. I'm going to now look at introducing Peter Richardson, who's with me, and hope everybody found what Kevin had to say as profound as I did, and I really thank him for it. Now, Peter Richardson is a small business owner and an ex-Victoria Police member. And Peter is a newly inducted board member of the Drug Advisory Council of Australia Limited. And Peter has been contributing to DACA's endeavours for around 6 years now. We've got a splendid working relationship with Peter and his delightful wife, Tammy. Peter has spent many years volunteering, forming and running sporting clubs and coaching kids in sports such as basketball, wheelchair basketball and football. While in those roles, he has used his influence where appropriate to guide kids towards a drug-free life. We thank him for that and applaud him. Peter's passion for his anti-drug campaigning comes from the terrible toll taken on his family due to a family member still to this day being in the grips of a meth or ice addiction. Also, on a more positive note, the help he was able to give to a young friend to get free and clean of the same evil drug inspires him. Peter is hoping through his and DACA's efforts to push back against the current maniacal surge towards decriminalisation, and his determination is really evident in everything he does. And I have to say that you'll hear Peter quite often picking up the phone and having a little chat with Tom Elliott. That's the Peter you hear on 3AW in the mornings. Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Jan. I'd like to broaden it a little bit because it's Kevin was focusing a lot on cannabis. We are here obviously to deal with trying to stop all decriminalisation of illicit drugs. And may I just say, decriminalisation will inevitably lead to legalisation. Decriminalisation of cannabis will inevitably lead to decriminalisation of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine and fentanyl, like it has in many other parts of the world, and it's already started here in Australia. Canberra is a test case, it seems, but inevitably, because of the agenda that's being pushed, it will come here unless we can push back hard enough. Now, one of the reasons that it's so easy for them to get these their agenda through is because the general well-meaning public has been convinced that the war on drugs has been fought and lost, so we've got to try something different. As Kevin said, and I'll assure you that the war has never been fought. So what we've got to do is we've got to fight that war. It's too important not to. The consequences of not fighting that war are so grave that it must be done. We can't. I can't comprehend a future as a society where we just put our hands in the air and say we've lost this war. Decriminalisation and legalisation will inevitably lead to more users, as it has in places like Oregon, in the United States, and British Columbia and Canada. And in actual fact, Oregon have reversed their laws, so they brought in decriminalisation of pretty much every illicit drug, including fentanyl and meth. And they've decided, because their streets are just like a war zone, that they have to reverse this. I'm not confident that if we let that happen here, that we have politicians that will admit they're wrong and reverse the laws. So that's why we've got to make sure it doesn't happen in the first place. And I read a story from a resident of Oregon who's saying that she agrees with the law being rescinded, but she doesn't believe that they are ready for it, because the numbers of addicts on the street, the number of homeless, etc., is much bigger now than before the law came in, and they haven't done anything to prepare for the law to be reversed, as in putting rehabs in place, etc. British Columbia, on the other hand, have got a trial till 2026, and yes, it's all illicit drugs being decriminalised as long as it's quantities that are for personal use. And at the moment, in a population that is not much bigger than Melbourne, they're having 7 overdose deaths a day. Try and comprehend that. And keep in mind that the 7 overdose deaths are only part of the statistics, because the damage that are being done to these people that might survive the overdoses, etc., will be damaged in so many other ways and will prematurely die, quite obviously. When they talk about decriminalisation, they're assuming that, well, one of the reasons they put forward for decriminalisation is that the criminal element will be taken from the streets. I can't comprehend how that actually works, but let's say pharmaceutical companies are supplying the users. I'm not sure that's going to go well, but let's face it, the pharmaceutical companies cannot supply drugs as cheap as the criminals. Hence, the user will still go to the criminals. So the only answer to that is that the what are now illicit drugs, that if decriminalised, obviously won't be called illicit drugs as such, but they will have to go on the PBS. So the taxpayer will have to pay for them, otherwise the user will still go to the criminals. The other financial imposts on our society won't go away due to the legalisation or decriminalisation of these drugs, because they're still doing damage, regardless of the fact that it's almost a moot argument whether they're legal or illegal, because they're still going to do the same damage. We're still going to have many people going on the NDIS because of their drug addictions. They're still going to be on welfare because they're not able to hold down a job or turn up every day to a job. So then we've got a situation where it's actually costing more, which has got to take money away from the services that need to be supplied, such as education and health, which means that this problem snowballs, because if people are not educated and they're not getting the health outcomes that they need to, it promotes despair and helplessness. Hence, people turn to drugs and alcohol. On top of that, obviously, you've got the current people that are being harmed by the drugs by their own use. And again, it's about the fact that they can't function in society, they can't hold down relationships, etc. There is no winners in this, regardless of whether they become people that aren't supposedly criminals because they're not doing something that is a criminal act. They're still harming themselves just as much. The harms to society. Road deaths now, there's more attributable to drugs than there is alcohol, and that's published fact, and it's substantially more. And I haven't got the figures as far as the percentage of violent crimes, family violence, etc., that are attributable to drugs, but my experience says that it's very high, very high. And we've got so much going on in the news at the moment with aggravated burglaries, home invasions, etc., with particularly young people. And it's never spoken of, but I'd be really confident that a high percentage of the youth offenders are also on drugs. In the news recently, as a for instance of harm, there was a sentence handed down to a drug user, long-term drug user, who hit a couple of road workers in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. One of the things that was really quite disturbing about the judgment was that the guy had been to court 10 days earlier and had been released. And the judge, in her comments in the sentencing for the road death, was that she made the comment that this was inevitable. I've got to ask the question, why was this guy out on the streets if the inevitable happened and someone died because of it? And the case of the police on the Eastern Freeway a few years ago now, both parties to blame in that case were on meth. So highlighting how much damage is being done on the road. And that happens regardless of whether these drugs are legal or illegal. We've got to stop people using them. And yes, that's going to be difficult, but again, we've got to fight that war. An incident that happened on my first day at the Seymour station, which was really disturbing and highlights the depravity of the levels people can sink to while using drugs. So I turn up to work the first day at Seymour, and a friend of mine was already on the job, and he was doing traffic control. And the incident that had happened overnight was that a drug deal had gone bad, and one of the public involved in this drug deal had got in his car, and the other one was wanting to go on with the argument. The guy in the car went up the road, turned around, come back. The other guy was standing in the middle of the road, and he wiped him out. Now, the most disturbing part of that was it happened at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the guy in the car had his 10-year-old son in the car with him doing this drug deal. Something I read the other night, and this is again going to the level that people stoop to when affected by these types of substances. This is a story out of Sierra Leone, and that might sound a long way from Australia, but believe me, it's not. It's going to come here. One, the drug's going to come here, and the depravity's going to come here. This drug that is currently rife in Sierra Leone, people are dying from this drug. It's called, I'm assuming it's pronounced Kush, K-U-S-H. I've read about this on mainstream media, and part of one of the substances in this drug is human bone. So at the moment, the Sierra Leone government is going about putting security in cemeteries because people are going in and digging up human remains to get the bones to grind down and put in these drugs. That's the sort of level of depravity that we will see, undoubtedly, if we keep going down the path that we're going. And finally, I'd just like to say, please have a look for this book. It's a book by Karen Redpath, Chasing After the Wind. I know this is a true story because it is so similar to our story. We have experienced so many of the same things, and every parent should buy it for their early teenage child and make them read it. Thank you.
Peter, you'll be very pleased to know that Karen's part of our audience tonight, so I think she'll be really, really thrilled to think that you've brought her into the conversation and highlighted her most worthy book. And we do have a great working relationship with Karen. So hello, Karen, to you, and many blessings to you, and I hope you're well. We'll now move on to questions, and I must say that we've got a lot of questions coming through, so I should move on to those very quickly. Kevin, I'm going to ask a question of you because it's relevant to you being there in Western Australia. What effect did the COVID hard borders have on the amount of methamphetamine coming into Western Australia?
Well, Jan, it had a big effect. In fact, there was a marked decrease, and we know that because there was a marked decrease in consumption levels that were demonstrated by the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission wastewater testing. So on the one hand, it was great, obviously, because there was less meth circulating in the community, apparent from those results. But on the other hand, it seems here in Western Australia that the government seemed to be taking credit for that, which is a bit disconcerting, that something that, you know, a good result that was incidental, at least supposedly incidental, to the hard borders. And we had hard borders for 2 years. So that a government would now take credit for it, because the meth action plan was instigated following the Labor Party's election win in 2017, and the only respite we got from that that so-called plan was when we had hard borders. So I suppose it's probably a good question, and I certainly don't make any assertion or draw a conclusion in respect of the hard borders, but I think it's probably a good question might be to ask the government at what point did they know that these the reduction in meth was occurring whilst the hard borders were closed. Because like I said, in Western Australia, our borders were closed for 2 years. So like I say, I don't certainly assert anything from that, but I think it's a valid question.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Now I'm going to put a question that the questioner has. It's Anne here from Victoria. It's for both of you to answer, so if you could just be mindful of the other one might need to chime in. So Anne has asked if you could give a suggestion as to how we could have a campaign to actually outline a suggested campaign to sell the notion of the prohibition of drugs and associated law enforcement to the general public. How would you both do this? What sort of campaign would be possible or feasible?
Sorry, Sorry, I'll jump in, Kev.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the first thing that needs to be done is to reduce demand, which is incredibly difficult. But then we've got to prosecute harder. We've got to we've got to secure our borders better. We have there's a lot of excuses out there, but the fact is we're an island, and it should be a lot easier for us to stop drugs than pretty much anywhere else. And we're just not trying hard enough.
Kevin?
Yeah, look, and I think just following on from what Peter said there, he's right, demand is an issue, and demand comes back to availability. And I thank Anne for her question, because it's a very good one. And I think an important focus would be on concentrating on availability. As I said in my monologue earlier, that the statistics show that 90% of meth is circulating throughout the community, whilst police intercept 10%. And we know from the research that availability, and this is research done through interviews of prisoners in lockups and detention centres, that availability is either easy or it's very easy. So I think with 90% of it out there, I think for Anne, the message should be about governments and law enforcement agencies reducing availability. That's where the focus should be.
The next question is from Joe Baxter in South Australia, and her question is, in your practical experience, what are the 3 key practical solutions needed to make Australia's drug prevention efforts more effective?
Do you want me to go?
Kevin, you can go.
Okay, so as I also touched in my earlier comments, I think the first thing is governments need to be open and transparent about their results, and instead of the rhetoric that we quite often get, the bouquets they give themselves, they need to be open and honest, and they need to hold law enforcement agencies to account for their reporting, so that if there are failures, or if there are things that aren't being done that could be done, then they get identified, and then from there, the third thing is that those things can start to be acted on.
Peter?
Well, my experience in the police force was that we're actually not prosecuting at all. So I think at the high level, the prosecutions are happening when the suppliers are caught, but they're pretty clever people, so it gets down the chain before most police have anything to do with the chain, and then we're not prosecuting at that level. So I think we've got to start from where the demand is. We've got to work up to the suppliers at the low level, which are generally addicts as well, and then try and get up the chain. And at the moment, I don't think we're doing that. And what Kevin was saying before about 90% of the drugs getting through, I mean, the suppliers, whether it be Mexican or whoever it might be, they've factored that in. So again, we've just got to do better at stopping it, and certainly prosecuting any high-level dealers that we can find, and making sure they never hit the streets again.
I've got a comment here. There's a corollary to that question, and it's a thank you for mentioning that we never hear that drugs are contributing factors to both family, community, and road trauma. The media needs to be more transparent. Well, amen to that, and that's what DACA's all about. And we have a unit called Touchstone, which Peter Richardson, who's with me, is a major contributor to raising the awareness of the impact of drugs, not just on the drug user, but the effect, the cascading effect, the domino effect, right throughout the community, to their employers, to their family, to their loved ones, to their siblings, to their children, to their spouses. It's never ending and it's disaster. So,
can I just jump in on that
yes,
one
yes.
There for a moment? The effect on the family and broader community. We had royal commissions in the last few years in Victoria about family violence and mental health. And I'm not saying that drugs are the sole contributor to those issues, but in reality, they're a major factor. And really, I think the family violence and the mental health royal commissions were not really what was needed. The Royal Commission should have been into the cause, not the symptoms. The cause is drugs.
Thank you, Peter. I have a question from Michael. He hasn't said where he's from in Australia, but Michael's question is, and this is for perhaps Kevin on this occasion, regarding pill testing and injection rooms, are there current data on outcomes, rehabilitation, damages and costs, especially considering the long-term impacts of drugs on quality of health? Actually, I might invite both of you to respond to that, because I know Kevin can start and Peter to follow, because I know Peter's very passionate about the medical supervised injecting room here in Melbourne. Kevin?
Yeah, well, so we don't have any supervised injecting rooms, certainly not that I'm aware of. You know, the issue of pill testing doesn't introduce any safety with respect to people taking those drugs. Obviously, pill testing is usually at major events where young people go, and there's some interesting statistics around drug use by young people. From previous drug and alcohol surveys, we know that 10% of high school students in Western Australia, at least, have admitted to trying illicit drugs. So if you think about 10%, that's approximately 100 students in every high school in the state of Western Australia, which is just an incredible statistic. And another statistic involving children is that we know, and kind of connected to what Peter was just saying, we know that every day in Western Australia, 20 children 15 years and under present to an emergency department, a hospital emergency, suffering a mental health crisis. So that's 20 every day, and that's the health department's figures from last year. Obviously, they may or may not be attributable to illicit drug consumption, but I don't know that data's actually been determined properly, but it's certainly anecdotally very worrying. So.
Thank you, Kevin. Peter, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, I'll mouth the words one time, safe injecting room. I don't call it a safe injecting room, I just call it an injecting room. I call a lot of the strategies of the Victorian government harm maximisation strategies. One of the interesting things at the moment is that the injecting room, the second injecting room that's proposed, the Victorian government won't release the report. The report was done by Ken Lay. It's been demanded that the report is released, and they're still not releasing it. Read into what you will. But my opinion of the injecting room is that it may be helping addicts to exist longer. It's not helping them to live longer. It's not helping them to get off drugs. It's keeping them breathing to then go and have another overdose.
Oh, thank you, Peter. I have a question here. They're pretty heavy-duty questions, and I thank you for the intensity of your focus, the dear people who are sending these questions in. This morning on the news in Melbourne, a citizen in his 60s saw 3 youths trying to steal his car. He tried to save his car. He was hit and bashed by the youths. he retaliated, and the youth were let go and not charged. Your thoughts, please. Perhaps I'll throw it to Peter and invite Kevin to put his bit into.
Yeah, well, this one's too early to make the call whether it involved drugs or not, but many of these incidents will. And there's been certainly a number of even more severe incidents of recent times that definitely have involved drugs, such as murders. And again, in Victoria, we're about a couple of years away now from raising the age of criminal responsibility to 14. So it's a good way of reducing crime, because anyone under 14 who commits some of these offences will not be called criminals anymore, and that opens it up for more senior people to employ kids to go and do these ag boogs, etc. But let's face it, when kids are on drugs, a lot of the time they're just doing it for the thrill anyway. It's not about any monetary gain, etc. When they're getting a thrill out of hurting someone, because they've got no empathy for people when they're on drugs like meth.
Kevin?
Yeah, look, Peter mentioned there about the age of criminal responsibility, and it's probably not discussed that much, but there is a real connect with the drug sale and supply of illicit drugs at the local level, at the suburban level, the packet dealer level, because people are aware. We already have them in Western Australia, where organised criminal gangs use young people to commit crime, and including drug dealing, and in order to escape criminal liability. So older people proactively take advantage of young people, their naivety, their youth, and actively use them to sell and supply illicit drugs, particularly in local levels, regional communities, that type of thing. So there's a big connection with raising the age of criminal responsibility.
I've got a question here that will probably raise Peter's hackles. Are you ready for this, Peter? In Victoria, over 40 police stations were closed down. How much can our police really do?
Yeah. Yes, it's certainly being reduced, but from my experience, Police Command was not demanding police do anything about the drugs anyway. My first experience in real life policing, we went to Knox City Shopping Centre, found a dealer who'd done a deal, and the buyer had immediately taken the drugs and ended up quite sick. We detained both of them and ultimately let them both go, or put one in an ambulance and took the name and phone number of the other and let them go. Well, yeah, I think the argument about the number of police stations, etc., the number of police is a good one in many ways, but they're actually not trying to enforce the laws that are out there at the moment.
Here's a question for both of you, and in a way it's a question, almost feel like I could have written it myself, but I haven't. It's fabulous, and it goes really to the heart of the problem, and what I alluded to when my confidant whispered the problem they had with the judiciary. Okay, so the question is, should we make more effort to hold drug users in the elite political, legal, public service and academic establishments to account, to remove them from decision-making on drugs and drug policy, to reverse the culture of permissiveness around and pervading Australian drug policy? Thank you very much for that question. That goes to the heart of the problem. It's also called willful blindness. Kevin, I'll throw to you.
So was that question in relation to, I was listening, I was just trying to clarify, is it in relation to treating some people differently to others with respect to using illicit drugs? Is that what it amounts to?
Yes, well, we've actually got a big question as to how the AFL treats drug use with its sporting elite at the moment. So the question is around the elite, politicians, the legal fraternity, people in academe being drug users, and basically a blind eye being turned, or they're in a position to not be convicted of it.
Yeah, look, the police officer in me wants to treat everybody the same. I don't want to treat any particular offender any worse or any better than any other offender, with the exception perhaps of young people. I want to see young people educated and nurtured and looked after. But adults, irrespective of any roles they might have in the community, I certainly don't want to see them given any extra favour, but I like to see everybody treated the same under the law.
Thank you, Kevin. Peter, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I agree mainly with that. The only exception I have that always comes to my mind is prison guards. I think any prison guard who actually takes drugs into a prison or allows someone else or facilitates it should get a very severe penalty, and maybe with the general population. And I think if you receive that penalty, and we wouldn't see so many drugs get into prison.
Oh, thank you very much for that comment. We've got one more question, and I'm going to put to Kevin, and because we're getting close to our time. Kevin, what does the WA government and WA police what are they currently saying about the meth problem in WA?
Well, thanks for the question, Jan. Last month, and just over a month ago, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission released its latest wastewater testing data, which showed that meth use in Western Australia had risen by 40%. Cocaine consumption in Western Australia had increased by 55%, and cannabis use had doubled. So naturally, the police minister was confronted by that in the media, and his comment was essentially that he was winning the war on meth, or winning the war on illicit drugs. So that was pretty head-scratching. We couldn't figure that one out, and the police declined to comment. So I really don't know where that leaves us when we've got a community that's suffering widespread pain over a long period of time, and we get that kind of rhetoric from government and nothing from the police senior management, nothing at all.
Thank you very much for that important update there for us on the East Coast, and I hope that the people joining us around Australia appreciate that we've actually got a pan-continental problem here. It's an attitudinal thing. It's a malaise that is pervading our entire nation, and we have to wake up, because it's a terrible impost on society, and we're heading in a very, very dangerous direction, and it's a very, very slippery slope. And unfortunately, sometimes I feel that decision makers have got the memory of a goldfish, in that they look at something that could be something that's very popular, something that emanates through social media activity, and it might be something that's a view held by one person or half a dozen people, and it becomes a new truth. And it's because of the power of the narrative. And we must be able to analyse and discern and unbundle information that comes to us, and make sure that the information that we are extending ourselves to trumpet or support, that you've actually done some thinking about it. It's not just a little trendy, whimsical thing. We know that lots of information can be very carefully, especially boosted through social media. And we also know that there are a lot of malign forces around the globe who are really well trained in managing the narrative. and that's a master manipulation exercise. So you need to be very careful about who you listen to, and we look at the most reliable and erudite sources, and sources that are backed up, empirical evidence, before we extend ourselves. Now, on your behalf, what I wanted to do is to thank both Peter and Kevin for their splendid contributions tonight, for Kevin there in Perth, for Peter here with me in Melbourne. We hope that everybody has taken on board a lot of this really powerful information based on their frontline experience as police officers. They are telling you exactly how it is. They maintain a vigilance in this situation, and so I really thank them for the power of their contribution this evening. And just before we close, I'd like to remind you that we do have the event with John Spooner coming up on the 4th of May, and you will, as somebody who has subscribed to this webinar, you'll receive the try booking link as an email in the next day or so. So you can make a booking and join us if you're here in Melbourne. I also encourage you to consider making a donation via our website to help us defray costs and just survive to the next round. And I just draw your attention to the opportunity to buy the splendid book by Elaine Walters, one of the co-founders of the Drug Advisory Council. And also, too, one of the messages I received is a big thank you from Karen Redpath, who said thank you very much for mentioning my book, Peter. So it's been a very, very pleasing lineup of people tonight, and I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for your generosity of spirit. And in anticipation, I encourage you to spread the message and join us with our next webinar. Thank you very much, one and all.